Friends are always a strange group of characters, and I've always been attracted towards the stranger the better in my...
For decades, James Spader was one of Hollywood's most unpredictable and magnetic actors. From intense early roles to unforgettable performances that blurred the line between brilliance and obsession, he never followed the traditional path of stardom. Then, almost without warning, he began to disappear. Fewer films. Long gaps. A career that seemed to shift in ways fans couldn't quite understand. Rumors quickly filled the silence. Some claimed he walked away from Hollywood by choice. Others whispered about health issues, industry conflicts, or personal struggles hidden far from the spotlight. The truth, however, is far more complex and far more revealing than anyone expected. Behind James Spader's retreat from mainstream fame lies a story of control, boundaries, and a deliberate rejection of the Hollywood machine. While audiences expected him to chase blockbuster success, Spader was quietly redefining what success meant to him. But that choice came at a cost: professional misunderstandings, public speculation, and years of unanswered questions. What really happened to James Spader isn't a tale of sudden collapse or scandal. It's a story of an artist who refused to be molded, who chose intensity over popularity, and who accepted isolation rather than compromise. Now the pieces finally come together, revealing why Spader stepped back, what he struggled with privately, and how his decisions reshaped both his career and his life. This is the truth behind it. Disappearance one Hollywood never fully explained. James Spader was never meant to be ordinary. From the moment he appeared on screen, there was something unsettling yet irresistible about him, a quiet intensity that made audiences lean in closer. In the 1980s and 1990s, while many actors chased likability and box office safety, Spader chose complexity. He played characters who were obsessive, morally ambiguous, and often deeply uncomfortable to watch. And that choice would define both his rise and his retreat from Hollywood. Early in his career, Spader quickly gained a reputation for fearless performances. He wasn't interested in being the hero or the heartthrob. Instead, he gravitated toward characters driven by obsession, power, and psychological tension. Films like Sex, Lies, and Videotape positioned him as an actor willing to expose emotional rawness others avoided. Critics praised him, directors trusted him, and audiences remembered him. Yet even at the height of this success, Spader was already moving differently than his peers. While Hollywood celebrated momentum, Spader questioned it. He disliked publicity, avoided red carpets, and openly rejected the idea of maintaining a brand. Fame to him was a byproduct, not a goal. As studios pushed him toward leading man status, he quietly resisted. He turned down roles others would have considered career-defining, not because they weren't prestigious, but because they didn't interest him emotionally or intellectually. This resistance confused Hollywood. Agents worried. Executives grew frustrated. In an industry that rewards consistency and compliance, Spader's refusal to play along made him unpredictable. He wasn't difficult, but he was uncompromising. And that distinction mattered. Opportunities began to thin, not because his talent declined, but because he refused to conform to expectations that came with stardom. Behind the scenes, Spader was also navigating personal boundaries. He valued privacy fiercely, guarding his inner life with near-obsessive discipline. Interviews were rare. Personal details were scarce. The less he shared, the more speculation grew. Fans and media began asking the same question. Where did James Spader go? By the late 1990s, his presence in major films had noticeably decreased. Some assumed his career was fading. Others believed he had fallen out of favor. But the truth was quieter and far more deliberate. Spader wasn't disappearing. He was stepping away. He began choosing smaller, character-driven projects and eventually turned toward television, a move many actors of his stature once viewed as a step down. For Spader, it was liberation. Television gave him something Hollywood no longer could: control. Roles like Alan Shore allowed him to explore layered, morally conflicted characters over time, without the pressure of box office expectations. He could work intensely, then retreat completely. No press tours. No constant exposure. Just performance and then silence. Reveals the foundation of what really happened to James Spader. His withdrawal wasn't sudden and it wasn't accidental. It was the result of years of resisting an industry that demanded visibility over substance. While Hollywood chased stars who could be marketed endlessly, Spader chose depth, privacy, and autonomy, even if it meant being misunderstood. The disappearance wasn't a fall. It was a decision as James Spader's appearances grew more selective. The silence around him began to speak louder than any role ever could. Hollywood is not comfortable with absence, especially when it comes from someone once considered indispensable. With fewer interviews, fewer films, and long stretches out of the public eye, rumors rushed in to fill the void. And like most rumors born of silence, they were rarely accurate. Some claimed Spader had become difficult, that directors no longer wanted to work with him. Others suggested health problems or emotional instability, assuming that an actor so drawn to dark characters must be unraveling off-screen as well. None of it was confirmed, yet the speculation stuck, slowly reshaping his public narrative. In an industry built on visibility, choosing privacy is often mistaken for decline. The reality was far less dramatic and far more intentional. Spader had reached a point where the mechanics of Hollywood no longer aligned with how he wanted to live. He disliked promotion, resented being packaged, and found the constant performance off-screen more exhausting than any role he played on screen. The pressure to remain relevant felt hollow to him. Rather than burn out loudly, he stepped back quietly. There were also personal shifts happening away from the cameras. Spader became increasingly protective of his time, his family, and his mental space. He had watched peers lose themselves to fame trapped by expectations, contracts, and public personas they no longer recognized. For Spader, withdrawal became a form of self-preservation. This retreat, however, came at a cost. Casting decisions often rely on predictability. Studios want assurance actors who will show up, promote tirelessly, and remain visible. Spader offered none of that. He wouldn't commit to relentless schedules or publicity demands, and he refused to shape his identity to fit commercial trends. As a result, offers slowed. Not because his talent was questioned, but because his boundaries were inconvenient. Yet even during these quieter years, Spader never stopped working. He simply chose projects on his own terms. Television became his refuge, not because he lacked options, but because it allowed sustained character exploration without the invasive scrutiny of film stardom. Roles like Alan Shore and later Raymond Reddington gave him creative satisfaction while preserving anonymity between seasons. He could disappear for months, live normally, then return fully present when the work called. The rumors persisted because Hollywood struggles to accept intentional absence. Audiences were conditioned to believe that success must be loud and constant. Spader challenged that idea. He proved that stepping back didn't mean fading away. It meant redefining control. Dismantles the myths surrounding James Spader's so-called disappearance. There was no breakdown, no exile, no scandal hidden from view. What looked like retreat was actually resistance. He resisted the industry's demand for exposure, resisted being reduced to a brand, and resisted sacrificing his inner life for external validation. In doing so, he became an outlier. An actor whose silence unsettled Hollywood more than any controversy ever could. When The Blacklist premiered, it didn't just reintroduce James Spader to a new generation, it redefined his career on his own terms. As Raymond Reddington, Spader delivered one of the most hypnotic performances television had seen in years. His voice, cadence, and unpredictable charisma dominated every scene. Almost overnight, the actor many believed had faded away became unavoidable again. But behind the success of The Blacklist lay a reality far more demanding than fans realized. The role was tailor-made for Spader's strengths, morally ambiguous, intellectually sharp, and emotionally layered. Reddington wasn't a hero or a villain, he was both, often simultaneously. For Spader, this complexity was intoxicating. It allowed him to fully inhabit a character without compromise, something Hollywood films had increasingly denied him. Yet the success of the show brought back the very pressures he had once escaped. Unlike film, television demands endurance. Season after season, Spader carried the weight of the series almost entirely on his shoulders. Long shooting schedules, intense scripts, and the physical toll of sustaining such a commanding presence began to accumulate. While audiences saw effortless brilliance, behind the scenes the workload was relentless. Spader, now older and more protective of his boundaries, felt the strain deeply. Despite this, he remained fiercely committed to the role. Cast and crew often spoke of his professionalism, preparation, and intensity. But what they didn't see was the personal cost. The fame that followed the Blacklist was different, more constant, more invasive. Social media amplified visibility in ways Spader had always resisted. Even as he avoided online platforms and interviews, the spotlight found him again. As seasons progressed, fans noticed subtle changes. His screen time fluctuated. Storylines shifted. Speculation returned. Was Spader tired? Was he stepping back again? The truth was once more layered. He was balancing creative fulfillment against physical exhaustion, artistic passion against the need for privacy. The very role that revived his career also tested the limits he had spent decades. Protecting reveals the paradox of James Spader's resurgence. The Blacklist gave him relevance on a massive scale, but relevance came with sacrifice. Unlike earlier in his career, he could no longer disappear between projects. The machine he had once rejected now demanded consistency, and Spader had to decide how much of himself he was willing to give. What makes his journey remarkable is not that he returned to the spotlight, but that he never fully surrendered to it. Even at the height of the Blacklist's success, Spader remained elusive, choosing silence over spectacle, craft over celebrity. By the time the Blacklist came to an end, James Spader had already made peace with something most actors never do. The idea that visibility is optional is not about a comeback or a farewell, it is about resolution. Where James Spader stands today is exactly where he always intended to be, in control, unseen when he chooses, and fully defined by his work rather than his fame. After years of carrying the Blacklist, Spader quietly stepped back once more. There was no announcement, no dramatic exit, no explanation offered to the public. And that silence was intentional. He had given the industry one last sustained performance on a massive scale, and now he reclaimed the space he had always protected. Unlike many stars who fear irrelevance, Spader seemed almost relieved to disappear again. Those close to him describe a man deeply satisfied with what he has accomplished. He never chased blockbuster dominance, awards campaigns, or constant reinvention. His career unfolded in deliberate phases, intense visibility followed by deliberate retreat. This rhythm allowed him to avoid burnout, preserve his identity, and remain selective. What some interpreted as inconsistency was actually discipline. Spader's story challenges Hollywood's most sacred rule, that success must be loud, constant, and ever-expanding. He proved that an actor can step away without failing, return without apologizing, and leave again without explanation. His power was never tied to ubiquity, it was tied to presence. When he appeared, audiences paid attention. When he vanished, they wondered. And that mystery became part of his legacy. There were no scandals waiting to be exposed. No tragic downfall hidden behind closed doors. What really happened to James Spader is far more unsettling for Hollywood than scandal ever could be. He refused to belong to it. He rejected the transactional nature of fame and chose a career shaped by autonomy rather than appetite. Today, James Spader exists largely outside public view, exactly as he prefers. Whether he returns for another role or remains absent is irrelevant to the story itself. His impact is already sealed, not through quantity, but through intensity. Each performance remains etched into memory because it was never diluted by overexposure. Closes with a truth rarely acknowledged in celebrity culture. Disappearing does not mean failing. Sometimes it means choosing yourself. James Spader's life and career stand as a quiet rebellion against an industry that demands everything. He gave what mattered and kept the rest.